So you're looking to start an LLC in New York this year. You've probably seen a very specific, highly approachable number floating around the internet, right? It looks incredibly straightforward and, honestly, maybe a little too good to be true. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to unpack the genuine financial depths of starting a business in the Empire State. Because as you're about to see, the true cost of a New York LLC in 2026 goes way, way beyond that initial price tag you see advertised online.
Okay, let's dive right into this. $200. That is the number that anchors almost everyone's expectation. It's exactly what the New York Department of State officially charges to file your articles of organization. You know, that foundational document that legally brings your company into existence. And honestly, if New York operated like pretty much every other state, our explainer could wrap up right here. You'd pay your $200 once, get your LLC, and get to work. But unfortunately, that expectation is literally just the tip of the iceberg. What that $200 fee doesn't cover actually matters significantly more than what it does.
So let's get real for a second and adjust that baseline. An honest, completely transparent year-one budget for state fees actually sits at $250, not $200. Why? Well, because you have to factor in the required certificate of publication, which carries its own separate $50 filing fee. You're legally required to file this certificate with the Department of State within 120 days of forming your LLC. So right out of the gate, your absolute minimum fixed cost to the state is $250. But notice I said fixed cost to the state. And that brings us to the absolute most unique and frankly expensive quirk of New York business law.
Enter Section 206 of the New York Limited Liability Company Law. This is the hidden wild card that catches so many founders totally off guard. Remember that 120-day window we just talked about? Well, within that window, New York forces you to announce the formation of your business in 2 newspapers, specifically one printed daily and one printed weekly. And you have to do this for 6 successive weeks. But here's the real kicker. You don't get to just pick the cheapest local papers you can find. No way. The law specifically dictates that these newspapers must be designated by the county clerk of the county where your LLC's official office is located.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates why New York LLC costs are so notoriously difficult to pin down. You see, the state doesn't set the advertising rates for these newspapers. There's no official rate card you can just download. The newspapers set their own prices. Based on verified 50-state research, these publication costs typically range from $200 all the way up to over $2,000. It's completely wild, and it depends entirely on your LLC's official county. If you form in an expensive market, that newspaper bill is going to be incredibly steep. So it is absolutely crucial to call your local county clerk to ask which papers are designated and then call those papers for quotes before you ever file your initial paperwork.
Okay, before we talk about how to manage those high newspaper costs, I want to bust a very persistent, outdated rumor that's been scaring a lot of founders lately. You might have seen articles claiming that the new 2026 New York LLC Transparency Act requires every new business to pay an extra $25 fee and file a beneficial ownership report. Well, what's the truth? If you are forming a domestic New York LLC, meaning you're creating the company right there in New York, you are completely exempt from these reporting requirements and fees. The $25 fee and those disclosure reports, they only apply to foreign LLCs. That means companies formed outside the United States that are seeking authority to do business in New York. So if you're forming domestically in 2026, you owe absolutely nothing under this law. Period.
All right, so returning to those potentially massive publication fees, how do savvy business owners actually handle this? Well, they use a strategy filers call the Albany Practice. This is a fully legal, strategic workaround to drastically slash your variable publication costs. Remember, Section 206 says you must publish in the county named in your articles of organization. But it never says that county has to be where you personally live or work. So, Step 1, you name a lower-cost county as your official office. Step 2, you run your 6 weeks of notices in that county's much cheaper designated papers. And Step 3, to make this whole thing work legally, you hire a registered agent in that cheaper county to serve as your official address and forward your legal mail to you. Yes, it does make that county your on-record location, but the savings, they can be absolutely enormous compared to publishing in places like Manhattan.
Now you're probably sitting there thinking, come on, what if I just ignore this whole archaic newspaper thing entirely? I get it, but I really wouldn't recommend it. The statutory penalty sounds incredibly severe. The Department of State plainly warns that any LLC failing to complete the 6 weeks of publication and file the $50 certificate within the 120-day window, quote, will have their authority to carry on, conduct, or transact any business suspended. In plain English, your LLC loses its legal authority to operate in New York. Yikes.
But hey, take a deep breath, do not panic. If you accidentally miss the deadline, your business isn't going to just vaporize overnight. The second half of that exact same law, the part most people conveniently forget to mention, provides a massive safety net. It specifically guarantees that missing the publication requirement shall not limit or impair the validity of any contract or act of your LLC. It also doesn't strip away the rights of the people you do business with. So your signed agreements, they remain completely valid. The law basically treats this as a compliance failure that you need to correct, not a trapdoor that destroys the business you've already built.
So, let's shift gears for a minute from formation over to maintenance. Because, surprise, surprise, the costs don't stop after year one. Here's a tiny number that is incredibly easy to forget: $9. This is for your biennial statement. Every 2 years, during the original calendar month you formed your business, you must pay this $9 fee to the Department of State. It's usually handled super quickly online, but you absolutely have to put it on your calendar or your company's record will fall out of good standing.
And then, of course, there's the tax department. Completely separate from the Department of State is an annual filing fee submitted using Form IT-204-LL. This fee scales based on your New York source gross income. It starts at a minimum of $25 and caps out at $4,500 for companies making over $25 million. And honestly, here's where a lot of founders trip up. Even if you're a single-member LLC that the IRS considers a disregarded entity for federal taxes, this New York State fee still applies to you. If you have any New York source income, gain, loss, or deduction, you owe at least that $25 minimum, which is usually due by March 15th for calendar year filers.
All right, amidst all these fees, let's look at a bright spot. A beautiful round number, $0. This is exactly what you should pay for your Federal Employer Identification Number, or EIN. This is the tax ID banks are going to ask for when you go to open your business checking account. You're going to see countless online services offering to get this for you for a fee. But listen to me. You can get it completely free directly from the IRS website. Never ever pay a third-party service for your EIN. Keep that money in your pocket to help pay for those newspaper ads. So let's pull all of this together into your ultimate year one game plan. On day 0, you file your articles of organization for your $200 flat fee. By week 1, before you do anything else, you're calling the county clerk of your chosen official location to get those newspaper rates. Fast forward, and before day 120, you're filing your certificate of publication with the state for $50, along with your newspaper affidavits attached. And then ongoing, you calendar your $9 biennial statement every 2 years and your annual tax department fee every March. That right there is your actionable checklist to maintain perfect compliance without any sudden budgetary shocks.
Which leaves us with the single most important decision you have to make right now. Which county will your New York LLC call home? As we've seen today, just defaulting to your home address or the most convenient location might cost you thousands of dollars in totally unavoidable advertising fees. But by understanding the rules of the game, verifying costs with a few quick phone calls, and maybe utilizing a strategic registered agent, you can take total charge of your variable costs. So before you fill out that very first form, you have to ask yourself, where does it truly make the most financial sense for your business to exist on paper?